What is up everyone and welcome to the next PC video. It is absolutely crucial that you go back and watch the other one. Just in case you haven't, I basically ended on a massive cliffhanger because the new video card that I added seemed to be giving me some problems. But it was probably a problem caused by myself, because as people diagnosed in the comments, those particular LEDs that illuminated on the card means a power delivery problem to the card. I believe it says like power connector A disconnected or B disconnected. Well, I had both of them, so that suggests that there is a problem with my cable connection, and I have not looked. That is a promise, folks. I have not opened up this system. I'm doing it live on camera, and we're going to figure it out together. So, without further ado, as I try and get my breath back from talking at sort of 90 miles per hour, let's unscrew the side panel and see what we get. Now, I just want to put it out there that the majority of the reason for having the cliffhanger was not because I was giving up on the system last time. I think people sort of, not everyone, but a couple of people sort of like, man, Tom got one tiny problem and stopped the video, blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't really that. It was more so because I had to do other things. I couldn't justify continuing filming because I knew I wouldn't have time to edit the video and get it up. And that ended as a really nice little video anyway, and it's nice to have a two-parter. So I think the first thing that we're going to look at is the connections on both cards and on the PSU. So let's take a little look closer up. So this is the sort of region that we want to work in. Now, of course, here is the card in question, the new 4870. Now, if I just make sure that I push both of those connectors in, I can guarantee that they are pushed into the max of their abilities. Same goes for the top card. But somebody in the comment section said that they saw the connector loose on the PSU itself. So, let's have a look. Pushing cables, pushing that one, that one, that one, and that one. Pushing in that one, and that one, and all of these cables, even though these aren't to do with the video card, just making sure everything is firmly pushed in. Yes, yes it is. 100%, being very thorough here, folks. I can guarantee that all of those cables are pushed in. So, let's take a look if my pushing made any difference. Always a scary moment, folks. Let's plug it in. Let's take a little look. Like that. Switch it on. And 3, 2, 1, go. So as you guys can see, that is the exact same problem as before. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the camera, switch off the camera, get a torch, and get my head right in close to those PSU connections and take a little look, because people seemed to be fairly certain that one or more of those connectors wasn't plugged in properly. So I'm going to have a right good look in there just to eliminate that, because that's what those LEDs indicate, is a power delivery problem to the card. So with my trusty torch, I've had a right good look into the system. Now what I'm going to do is turn off unplug the PSU, just to be safe on this one. And one thing I'm going to do before I start unscrewing things and taking a closer look is I'm going to unplug the second video card. And people might say that it is probably a good idea to plug in a display just to see what's happening. There might be something to say for that, but this card is clearly not booting, so I want to get to the bottom of that first. So we've unplugged the bottom graphics card from the power completely. Now I'm going to unplug the top graphics card, and I'm going to steal the top GPU's power connectors and plug them into the bottom GPU. And what I'm going to do to make my life a lot easier, apologies folks, that might have come out a bit loud on the camera, that would have been me dropping my torch. To make my job a lot easier, I'm just going to move these drives out of the way, if I can get away with doing that ever so slightly, because I know the SATA cables are very tight, but I just want to get a few of these things out the way. So here we have the other PCI connector, and I'm going to connect that to this card. So now, as you guys can see, we have plugged in a totally different cable to this card. Now obviously when we boot up, the top card is going to give us the power delivery error, because it's not plugged in, and I don't recommend doing this, but we're just going to quickly see if that other connector powers up this video card. That way it will tell us if it is, it'll isolate the problem a little bit more down the sort of signal chain of, well, the power chain really. So let's take a little look. And switching on the system would be a good idea. Yeah, that was unexpected. That is very, very odd. So that should not have happened, folks, and does not help me in my diagnosis whatsoever. That has just, if anything, made the issue more weird. So do you know what I'm going to do now is, just while I'm troubleshooting, just to keep track of all of this stuff, I'm going to get some tape. And I'm going to say on camera to remind myself that the card I stick the green tape to is the card that we have upgraded. So the new card, the one that I haven't had in my possession for the last 2 or 3 years, that is the one that I got sent to me. So if I'm swapping around cards, I can keep track of it and I don't lose my mind trying to troubleshoot this system, because if I'm totally honest, folks, I thought this video was going to begin as me swapping those power connectors, realising it was a problem with the cable, reseating it into the PSU or whatever, and then, you know, yip-de-doo, we're back up and running. But I believe I'm going to have to delve deeper into this. So my next port of call is to swap both of the cards to see if it's an issue with the slot on the motherboard. So let's take a little look. So I've taken the screws out of the cards and I'm going to swap the cards. Now, something that someone said, I found quite an interesting comment on the video, and this is probably a good time to address a couple of comments. They mentioned that I need to check in my motherboard manual which slots to put my video cards in on the motherboard, because maybe the slots I'm putting my video cards don't correspond and aren't compatible with Crossfire. Now, for starters, if you have a motherboard that specifies which... No, actually, before I mention that, for starters, I only have 2 PCIe slots, so they have to go in those slots. There are no other slots for them to go in. And this motherboard supports Crossfire, so that is blatantly the slots that you use, because they won't go anywhere else. But in fairness to that particular viewer, whoever mentioned that, I didn't specify any time in the video my motherboard model number. So, if you did happen to have a motherboard with multiple PCIe slots, even if the motherboard for some reason states in the manual that you would have to use that slot and that slot, or that slot and that slot, or this slot and that slot for a Crossfire setup or an SLI setup, it makes no difference to actually having cards slotted in at boot up, regardless of software compatibility, because yes, Crossfire and SLI are software, you know, they're software controlled operations, so regardless of the software requirements in relevant to the routing capabilities of the slots on the motherboard, you will be able to boot up with your cards anywhere, because even if you weren't using Crossfire or SLI, you'd be able to use those cards as individual graphics cards within Windows anyway to drive separate displays, which was the pre-Crossfire and SLI way of doing it anyway. But whatever, I'm rambling now. So what I need to do is get these cards in the opposite slots. So here we have the one with the green tape, which is the new one, of course, but we'll put the old one in the bottom. So as far as we know, if the problem now continues, what is going to happen if it does the same thing with this card in the bottom? If this card gives me the 2 lights problem, I'm definitely going to connect a display to see what's on the display, because I'll be lost. But if this card gives me the 2 lights problem, I can then say it's the card. Pretty much say it's the card at least. Or I could then try booting up with just this card, etc. Which, you know, plenty of people were suggesting, which is a very good suggestion, you know. Learn to walk before you can run, or whatever the saying is. But yeah, that was just a little thing to mention about somebody saying that I had my cards in the wrong slots. There are no other slots for them to go in, and also that thing I just mentioned about the PC will still boot up, even if you're not conforming to the requirements for Crossfire or SLI. Also, one other comment I'd like to address, and a couple of people were having a discussion about power delivery to my PSU, which I found a very interesting discussion. Now, I tend to find when people have an enthusiast's interest in a platform, for instance, gaming PCs, they will gather a knowledge of everything related to the PC, and electricity is obviously on that list because you need electricity to power the system. However, I do tend to find that a lot of things that get thrown around in YouTube comments on various people's videos, whether it's a YouTuber like me who's, you know, not famous and just does this stuff for fun, or whether it's someone that's actually, you know, famous on YouTube for doing this stuff, like even Linus Tech Tips or whatever, I find a lot of the comments that are thrown around about power delivery and stuff like that are filled with inaccuracy and with no evidence to back up what they're saying. Okay, so the Crossfire bridge is on. The cards are in. Now, what I was saying a minute ago before the cut about power, I'll resume saying that in a second because it's turning into a bit of a rant, and I need to figure out if this card is working before I start ranting, really. So I'm going to connect up the power connectors, which is definitely easier to do while the system is lying down. There's one in the top. There's the other in the top, and I'm definitely pushing them in. I just slid the whole system across the desk a little bit there while plugging these in, so that's clear. Plug this one in. This is a little bit tight here, folks, just a little bit tight, but that's okay. So just to confirm, in case anybody is now lost, just after seeing to my camera there for a second, we now have the new card that I've been given, the one that we installed in the last video, in the top slot. So yeah, we now get to see what the heck is going on. So let's flip around and see what's happening. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, here we go. Let's plug her in once again. Turn her on and go for it. So, just pulling you off the tripod for a second, you can see, if I turn this lights off, exact same symptoms as last time, but just reversed. So yeah, that is that, unfortunately. So we are going to try one more thing before I finish up the video, but just to reiterate what's happening, exact same symptoms but now swapped. So that tells us that there is no power delivery issue because it's in a totally different slot, totally different power. Now, this doesn't mean to say that we know that the card is dead. The card may not be dead, and the next thing that I'm going to try is totally removing the card that we know works and using just this card, and also connecting a display so that we can see if it's outputting anything. But as you guys know, I interrupted myself, or rather my camera interrupted me when I was speaking about the whole power delivery thing. As I was saying, a lot of different things get thrown around YouTube comment sections about power, and I just want to put a couple of little things straight here. Now, this is a 650 watt PSU, and that's what it's rated to output. Now, this is a fairly good quality PSU, Corsair AX650, so you can pretty much say that yes, you can load it up to a 650 watt capacity. It will probably output close to there, maybe around 600 watts, and it will be very efficient while doing so. But what you've got to remember is I live in the UK with 230 volt electricity. So this is a kettle lead, as you guys know, standard kettle lead, rated for 10 amps. And on the other end of this is a 13 amp plug going into a 13 amp socket. Now, a 13 amp plug can deliver 3,120 watts of power into whatever appliance you're plugging in at the full 13 amps at 230 or 240 volts. You can do the calculation yourselves, it's super easy. So, by no stretch of the imagination is this system starved for power. That doesn't come into it, because it's not. For starters, even if it was exceeding the full load that this PSU can handle, which it isn't, it does boot up and it will sort of spike at whatever components are sucking a load of juice at that one time, but no way will this ever be lacking from power from an outlet. And that's not just because we're in the UK with beefy electricity, that goes for anywhere in the world. This is a PC, and I've got loads more things that consume far more power than this thing, including the kettle that's sitting in my kitchen downstairs, which will pull the full 13 amps out of a 13 amp socket. Now, another thing that was spoken about in the comments because I switched on the PSU and the lights dimmed. Why is that? That is simply because I have quite a few things switched on in my room, so there's quite a power draw, and this is plugged into an extension lead, and like I said, it will spike when you first turn it on, and it's such a sharp spike that the power just needs a little bit of time to filter through. It's, nanoseconds to filter through. That is why you see a slight dim in lighting, and also CFL lamps, which is what I'm using to light this video right now, are very sensitive to fluctuations in power, so you will see every little dip and dive in those lights. So there is no problem with power. And one more thing that was thrown about power, what was thrown around about power? Oh yeah, that's it, dirty power. Somebody said the only way to clean up your power is to use an uninterruptible power supply, a UPS. Well, that's not the case. If you're worried about dirty power, then you can get what's called a power conditioner for as little as £30. It's a magic device that will do its very best to even out the peaks and troughs in your electricity. However, I would not worry about it if I were you. I'd not waste your money on a UPS if you don't need one. I would not waste your money on a power conditioner if you don't need one, especially today with such power efficient, good quality PSUs. Whatever this guy gets given out of my outlet and probably out of your outlet will be absolutely fine, unless you've got some colossal problems with the electrics in your house. Either that, or you could be running some crazy appliance on the same circuit. For instance, there's a 32 amp ring main on the upstairs of my house for all of the sockets. The only things that's running as well as this right now is things like my computer monitors, these lights, maybe a phone charger in another room or something. But if you do have something like a washing machine or an angle grinder or anything like that plugged in on the same circuit, then yes, maybe you'll get some dirty power, but it will be nothing that can throw this out of whack enough to make one of your components throw back an error, because that's what this is for. The reason you have a PSU is because it takes what's coming out of the wall and it splits it up into all the little bits and bobs that the PC needs to power all of the individual components, without being too scientific about it. So that's why you've got a PSU, and that power thing, especially the dirty power thing, is just a common example of people taking something that is relatively true and just running with it sort of 100 miles per hour, thus making it not true at all. So yeah, that's just the thing on power. The fact that the graphics card isn't working has absolutely nothing to do with the electric coming out of my wall. So we're back down into the guts of the system once again, but this time all we're going to do is remove the crossfire bridge, because we don't need that, and also unscrew the bottom card. This is the card that we know that works, or it worked before I started faffing around with it. Anyway, unscrew it like this. Man, why did I do these up so tight if I knew I was still experimenting with this system? And I'll tell you the answer to that question. I did that because I honestly thought that swapping them would work. I don't know why. I just have lots of hope. I am blessed with having lots of hope when it comes to these little projects. So hopefully you guys are still with me. I know I've been doing a lot of talking about the previous part of the video. None of that is really relevant right now, but let's give it some relevancy by yanking out that card, making the system look 10 times less beefy. This is plugged in. That is our job done. Let's flip her up the right way and see if she boots. Okay, everybody, let's flip her around, plug her in, and I know I said I was going to attach a display. Well, I will be doing that, but first I'm just going to try the headless power up just to see what it does. So plug that in. 3, 2, 1, go. So, exact same thing again, as you guys can see. Okay, so that tells us that yes, it is probably an issue with the card. Resetting the system, holding the reset button will just hang there in a constant reset loop. But you can see once I release it to try and boot again, the card will spin up and I'll get the error. So that is fairly obvious what is happening there, folks, I'm afraid. That is not cool. But what we're going to do now is plug in my monitor and see if there's anything on the display at all. So I now have a display connected. Let's see what it does in 3, 2, 1, go. So still nothing on the display. And this does not shock me in the slightest, folks, because, let me turn this off. That doesn't shock me in the slightest because the card is simply not posting, and that is evident from what we already saw from the LEDs and the fan. Plugging in the display was just the last hope, really. So from the things that we've already tried, we've learned quite a lot. But there is one more thing I'm going to try before I finish up the video, and that is pulling out the new GPU, putting in the old GPU on its own without the other one, just plug it in, connect the display, and double check that my system powers up as normal. If so, then I can pretty much say that I'm 99% sure, or 99.999% sure, that the PSU is fine and there is a problem with this card. I mean, that is fairly evident anyway, but it's the tech world, and there can be all sorts of other funky little problems lurking around corners that are never discovered. And that's why I would quite like to put this card in a totally different PC just to try it out, but I don't really have those resources available. I could put it into my Hackintosh, but I am kind of secretly behind the scenes making some slight progress with that system, so the last thing I want to do is go faffing around with that. Plus it wouldn't fit in the case anyway, so I'd have to take out my motherboard, and it's just more stress than it's worth. So, because you've seen me dissect this a million times now, I'm going to flip it back round, do a quick cut, change the cards, and yeah, we'll test it out with just the old card and see if everything is as normal. Okay, so I've managed to get the monitor and the card in frame. It's been swapped, as you guys can see. Here we have the suspect faulty card, the new one with the tape on it. Is out of the system completely. Bearing in mind this is my first attempt at booting the system with just the new PSU upgrade, so let's see what she does. Ping. Booted right up. A little bit slow on the get-go there, but I assume that is related to all of the faffing that I've been doing with this poor system. So here we are, and let's just wait until it gets to the desktop just to prove it. Unless I've got a password. Yeah, I've got a password. So that's that. No keyboard or mouse connected, guys, but as you can see, it's doing 10 times more than the other card. So, let's shut this system down. So, that is that. Yet another cliffhanger, but not as dramatic as the last one, because unfortunately we now have nowhere to go beyond this, as far as I'm aware, unless I'm completely missing something. There may be like a faulty overclock on this card or something, but I'm going to have to look into that. I don't think there's a way of actually resetting the card the way it is. I mean, this card simply does not boot. So I don't know enough about it. Like I say, I learn at the same time as you guys lots of the time, and I can offer advice and help in the places that I know something about, but I'll never pretend to know everything that there is to know about something, because, you know, there's always something else to learn. So I want to thank you guys for coming along with me on this journey that has definitely not ended yet, because by hook or by crook I want to get a Crossfire setup running in this system. Now, because this card was a donation, and Tom donated it to me and he'd ordered it all the way from America, I'm going to have to speak with him about how things are going to work with possibly returning the card, etc. Now, if I'm going to do a little bit of research. If there is anything else that I can try at this end, then we'll see. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a faff, and definitely a shame, to say the least, because Tom went to all of that effort and obviously paid for this card because he wanted to make a contribution to IMNC and he thought it would be a cool one. And this is an uber cool donation just because of how much of a cool, unusual project this is for me. This PC has really seen an improvement with the new platform and everything, and running Crossfire would have been so cool. So I'll chat to Tom, see what he has to say, and I will definitely make another video about this. Obviously, it's one of those, it's not going to be one of those loose ends that I never answer, because this is going to get resolved one way or another. So again, thank you very much for watching, everyone. Just like in part 1, feel free to comment down below and have comment discussions, etc. And maybe I'll answer your question in the next video or just reply to your comment. Either way, I hope you've all enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video.